usually when I do this stuff, I don't like to read from it, so forgive me. I really hate reading from about a lecture that I think should let him speak for himself when he speaks. But Dr. Eliezer Papo is from Sarajevo originally, and he has a BA in law, an MA was in Midrash.
In linguistics.
In linguistics, and rabbinics also.
Rabbinic studies is separating, yes.
Lovely, wow. And I'm also
Oh.
and a PhD in Hebrew literature from Ben Gurion. And Dr. Papo also lectures on Hebrew folklore, Jewish folklore, Sephardic culture, and literature at Ben Gurion in the Department of Jewish Hebrew Literature. Lots of articles. If you Google him, you'll find all the articles that have been published by him. Lots of fantastic YouTube videos. I've been stalking him for a long time. And his stuff has been translated in so many languages, as well as works of fiction as well, I believe, right?
Yes.
So without any further ado, Dr. Papo.
Yeah. Well, thank you all, and let's start. So, being the fact that you are, let me just see if it works. No, it doesn't. Oh, maybe it works better when you. Yes, turn it on. No, it's not. It is on now. It's not.
I think it's because you're not using this one.
Oh, okay. So, show me how to use it.
Up and down.
Up and down. Okay, so.
It was blocked. Okay, tell me what this is. It should not block anybody. Is this okay now?
I don't even need it. Yeah, definitely.
How's that?
Okay, great. So let's start.
Thank you.
What you see here is the map of Spain. Now, if you concentrate, you will see that overwhelming majority of Jewish communities in Spain before the expulsion 1492 were actually not on the seaside. As you can see, most of them are located within the peninsula, right? So if, yeah, this is wrong direction. Okay, so even those who look close to the sea, when you make the map bigger, you actually see how remote from the sea they are. So you can actually, you see, on the big map, this looks close to the sea, but once you make the map, you see how far from the sea it is. Tudela, Tarazona, right? All these are places with medieval Jewish communities, right? So some of them obviously were on the seaside, right? Like Palma de Mallorca, which is an island, and so on. Okay, next thing. Once the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, well, first of all, we have to explain of which number of Jews we are talking. Let's say that 1391, 101 year prior to the expulsion, there were approximately 600,000 Jews living on the peninsula. Out of them, 200,000 were forcefully converted in 1391. Okay? So we actually stayed with 400,000 people. 100 years later, in 1492, additional 200,000 converted to Christianity, choosing between the expulsion and conversion, right? The condition for their stay on the soil of Iberian Peninsula was conversion to Catholicism. So basically, 200,000 Jews left, while 400,000 Jews, more or less, stayed in Spain under the Christian disguise and Christian names, and many assimilated, but many did not. Now, where did all these Jews went once they were expelled from the Ottoman Empire? Well, you can see basically that the title of the lecture, before that, the title of the lecture is the trans-Mediterranean and transatlantic nature of the Sephardic culture, right? So basically, it's not only trans-Mediterranean, but it's also transatlantic, because many of the new Jews, all Jews, new Christians, found their way to the New World. But the bulk of the community who was expelled in 1492 actually went all over the Old World, but mostly around the Mediterranean Sea. So basically we can say that this way they have established something that we can call virtual Sepharad. All those Sephardic Jews who left Spain and went any place to the mainland, right? Whether it's in southern Morocco, whether it's in northeastern Europe, they've actually lost their Sephardic identity, assimilating into local Jewish communities. So we can basically say that only those Sephardic Jews who stayed around the sea could maintain their specific and separate Sephardic identity within the, whatever you want to call it, within the scale of different Jewish identities. So to put it more biblically, you can say that whoever went to the inland 3 days away, 3 days walk away from the sea, he assimilated into other Jewish communities. People, however, who stayed, do we? Yes, we do. People, however, who stayed around the sea, they actually stay Sephardic. How come? Because they've established something that we can call Jewish Venice. Have you been to Venice in Italy?
You will be.
You will be. Great. Okay, so what's so special about Venice? Yes? Exactly. And the same thing is here. Venice is one single city, which is water-based city. So in order to go to a supermarket, or in order to go to your shrink or to your lawyer, you need to use a boat instead of a car or a horse. The same is true about Sepharad. It was not a state. It's not that Jews expelled other people from these realms and established their own political entity called Sepharad, but it's just that they have had infrastructure which actually made the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, their main street. So they were crossing the Mediterranean Sea all the time. They had more connections between community, let's say like Split and Venice, or community like Corfu and Izmir, than let's say Sarajevo and whatever you want, Berlin, Vienna, and so on. So basically, they were playing a significant role in commercial exchange between two worlds, between the Islamic world on the other side of the sea and the Christian world on the other side of the sea, right? So basically, there were Christian merchants also, and there were some Muslim merchants, but the middleman between two worlds, in disproportional number, were Jews. When I say in disproportional number, that means that if there are 2% of the Jews, that doesn't mean that 2% of international cross-Mediterranean or trans-Mediterranean merchants are Sephardic, but that 40, 50, 60% of them are, right? So basically, many Sephardic Jews dealt with international merchandise, and it was trans-Mediterranean. So it would be totally logical for a person, let's say, in Salonika, you see Salonika is here. So somebody is trained as a rabbi in Salonika, and then he ends up serving in Amsterdam, right? Now you will say, wow, that's a long continental way. Well, it's not. They would do everything by the sea, right? But basically, they were crossing not only the Mediterranean Sea, but also the Atlantic. So you can see that first Jewish communities in the New World were all exclusively created by the Sephardic Jews. Starting with, what's the oldest Jewish community in United States of America?
Rhode Island.
Yeah. Okay, so who created it? No. Okay, so Sephardic Jews created the community that you have today, but it's migrated a few times. Its final place today is Upper West Side Manhattan, right? The Spanish and Portuguese, exactly. So the first synagogue in the United States was a Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. Now when you say Spanish and you see Jewish geography is a very specific discipline. So when you say Spanish and Portuguese, where these people are coming from? Anything but Spain and Portugal, right? So Spanish and Portuguese are basically Jews of Amsterdam, London, and what was the original name of New York?
New Amsterdam.
New Amsterdam, exactly. So that's why the same community that exists in Amsterdam exists also in the New Amsterdam, right? The Spanish and Portuguese community. So these things are complicated because many a time Jews are not called according to the place where they actually live, but according to the place from which they originally came. So today when you say Spanish and Portuguese, that means that yes, these people originate in medieval Spain, but ever since they lived in Amsterdam, London, New York, Caribbean islands, and so on, and with usually not too many relations with Spain. Now we will concentrate on the Ottoman Empire, because the overwhelming majority of the Jews expelled in 1492 came to the Ottoman Empire. Some of them went to North Africa because it was close. Some of them went to Portugal only to be forcefully converted over there 4 years later, right, in 1496. Some of them even went to Italy and even to Papal lands. Middle Italy, Central Italy was basically the lands of Pope. So now you can say, well, what's the logic? These people were just kicked out from Catholic Spain, and then Catholic Pope gives them refuge. Well, it's complicated. In order to understand the expulsion from 1492, you have to go 101 years back in history to the forceful conversion of 1391. In 1391, the conversion was not initiated, not by the Pope in Rome, not by the cardinals in Spain, not even by bishops of Spain. It was actually instigation of low-level monks who instigated mobs all over Spain to plunder Jewish communities, kill, rape, and convert to Christianity. Now 200,000 people were converted, but not because the church wanted that, not because the Pope wanted that, not because Spanish crown or Spanish crowns, because in 1391 we are still speaking about different royal realms in Spain. So the elite, whether secular or religious, did not actually want forceful conversion of the Jews. However, though, let me put it this way. According to Jewish law, if a person converts to Judaism, and then next weekend he says, oh, I felt so Jewish last week, but I don't feel like it anymore. Let's say 2,000 years ago when Sanhedrin exists. If that person violates Shabbat, is he punishable for his violation?
Yes.
Why? Of course he is. I'm asking why.
There's rabbinical courts at that time that have the authority to kill people.
Yeah, but he says, converted to Judaism, but now I want to reconvert to paganism.
That doesn't exist.
Oh, so once Jewish, always Jewish. Well, we are not the only guys in the world to invent that rule. Every single monotheistic religion sticks to it. We say once a Jew, always a Jew. They say once a Christian, always a Christian. And the Muslims say once a Muslim, always a Muslim. Yes?
If it isn't the difference that you're defined as Jewish by like your community and technically like by your mom, but you can also be a convert, and the difference for Christianity, you just have to identify as a person of faith.
It's complicated, but let's concentrate on this side and then I'll answer your side. What's important on this side is to understand that as far as Christian church is concerned, especially Catholic and Orthodox brands of Christianity, baptism is not a willful act. How do we know that?
It's done with your baby.
Because it's done to a baby. And then later, that baby, as far as Catholic or Orthodox Christianity are concerned, that baby cannot say, you know, when it desecrates the canonic law, it can't say, well, nobody really asked me whether I wanted to be Catholic. Well, I never wanted to be Catholic. Well, I was baptized as a baby. No, you were baptized, you are Christian. You are Christian, you have to follow Christian law. So this is exactly what happened in 1391. And I'm not trying to write any apologetics concerning the Catholic Church. I'm just trying to explain the way things were. Once these Jews were converted forcefully, as far as Christian church is concerned, now they are fully Christian. The high echelons of the church never wanted them to be Christians. But now, once they were made Christians, the church had to make everything it could to make sure they are good Christians. That meant Inquisition. That meant taught police. Christian is about faith, so there is a taught police which checks what you believe or not, because you are not saved according to your actions, but you are rather saved according to what you believe. And the church is there to make sure you are saved, right? So basically, 1391, 200,000 Jews were forcefully converted. 1392, the Inquisition was established in Spain to make sure that all these unwilling converts adhere to Christianity. Now, obviously, overwhelming majority never wanted to be Christian. And we have at least 4 different types of response to forceful conversion. There were Jews who were saying, I will stay faithful to Judaism. I don't have anything to do with Christianity. I even consider it idolatry. There were Jews who were saying, well, God knows what he's doing. So if he already pushed me into a Christian society, I'll take advantage of both worlds. I'll keep Judaism secretly for the next world, and I will, in this world, I will function as outwards Christian. There were people who lost faith in God altogether and said, if God can allow for this to happen, then either he doesn't exist or he doesn't care. So there was pretty much salad of reactions, but overwhelming majority of Jews tried and strived to keep overwhelming majority of mitzvot. So as far as Christian church is concerned, within 100 years they started developing the idea that all the way there are rabbinical Jews in Spain, converts to Christianity will never really assimilate into Christianity. Why? Because the Jews are giving them infrastructure, right? The conversos don't really have amongst themselves people who can produce mezuzah and tefillin and kasher, sefer Torah, and who can teach them this and that, and right? But they want to keep the laws. But it's the Jewish community that provides them with the infrastructure. So the Spanish crown came to conclusion that the only way to solve Jewish question is to kick out the formal Jews from Spain, so that conversos will have to embrace their new religion, at least because they don't have any other option. Now, the phenomena, extraordinary phenomena, is that not only throughout 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, and 19th century, we had Jews coming from Spain and returning to Judaism and saying, I am Jose Alberto, son of Pedro, son of Pablo, son of so-and-so, who was son of Samuel of Latvia, who converted in 1492. So, not only that we had that until 19th century, we have it today. In 21st century, there are still people coming out of the closet or discovering that they have Jewish ancestry. Now, who is the most famous, probably, descendant of conversos who re-embraced Judaism? Give me a few names, and then I'll give you names that you never thought about. And then I'll get back to your question. Spinoza, have you ever heard of Spinoza?
Yeah.
Right. So Spinoza is basically father of what we could call today the idea of secular state. Now, the idea of secular state is something very typical for conversions. Why is that so? Think about it. Today in Israel, do we have civil marriage? No. Do we have religious majority in the parliament? No. No, we don't. No, you never have. Never. Likud and Avodah and all other secular parties are over, and our parties, yes, are overwhelming majority. So you don't have religious majority in the parliament. Now, if you don't have religious majority in the parliament, how come that religious law is imposed on the nation in its totality? Do you understand the question? I will. Why the heck, if there is no religious majority in the parliament, religious law defines the way that field of public life in the country is run? Yes, please.
A vocal community.
I beg your pardon?
A vocal community. There's a very vocal community in Israel of the very religious Jews who, regardless of their representation in parliament, are causing a lot of problems.
Well, they can be as vocal as you want, but if they didn't have obvious support of secular majority, that would never be the law. You can be as vocal as you want. Yes, please.
Well, although there is no religious majority in parliament, Israel was established as a Jewish state.
Okay, so you have too many people talking about we want civil marriage, but we don't have it, even though we have secular majority in the parliament. So just follow your own thought. Which is, secular majority doesn't want civil marriage. We'll get back to why. Yes? They want or they don't?
There's no separation of church.
There is separation when the secular majority wants it. When the secular majority doesn't want it, then there is no. I'll explain. Yes?
There's also the idea that in a parliament you have to team up basically with people who might, even though there's no religious majority, those people still do exist in the parliament, which are joining coalitions with secular.
Yes. Yes, that's also true. All these are parts of the answer, but I believe that generally the thing is, if you want to have a modern, Western, democratic, liberal state, then the state cannot interfere with who is marrying who. So it's very convenient, and overwhelming majority of Israelis just likes the fact that by delegating the question of marriage to rabbis, priests, and imams, you are actually preventing assimilation. Because you say, the only marriage you can ever, establish in this state is administered by the rabbis, priests, and imams. Then you go to the rabbi and you say, hi, this is my girlfriend, she's called Christine, and we would like to get married. And the rabbi says, are you crazy? How can I marry you? She's Christine, she needs to convert. And then you say, well, she doesn't want to convert. And he says, well, then, I don't know, go to the priest. Right? So you follow. The idea is, I'll get back to 1391. Overwhelming majority of Jews in Israel doesn't have the problem with the fact that religious law is imposed in the land when it fits the national, how should we call it, the national discourse, the national narrative, the national, right? So basically, I'm not saying everybody is there, but the overwhelming majority of people is just happy that assimilation is prevented in this way, which is, instead of saying, we are medieval state and we don't let you intermarry, we are saying, no, we are totally liberal state. Please marry whomever you want, just go to the rabbi and check with him, right? So, the same thing is totally true about medieval Spain. Overwhelming majority of Spanish people couldn't care less or even love the fact that their country is Catholic. So, Catholics were not bothered with the fact that the country was Catholic. They were cool with the fact that the country was Catholic. And the Jews in Spain, before the expulsion, were not bothered with the fact that the country is Catholic, because Rabbinic Judaism had its own narrative. And the narrative of Rabbinic Judaism is, oh, we are here by mistake. Tomorrow the Messiah will come and we will go home. It's true that we don't speak the language of the home. It's true that we were not born there. It's true that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers were born in Spain. But we'll go home. So, what I'm saying is that Rabbinic Judaism in Spain had its own narrative, that the Jewish presence in Spain is basically a mistake. It might be a pleasant mistake, it might be a long mistake, it might be a lovely mistake, but Jews never, ever disputed the Catholic character of the state, because they were kind of, it's not our state, it's your state. So you are Catholic, so it's your state, so it's logical that the state is Catholic. The only group in Spain and later in Western Europe that was bothered by the Catholic character of the state were conversos. Why? Because they were taken by force from their Jewish community. Once they converted, Catholics developed this entire racist legislation. There were laws called las leyes de pureza de sangre. In other words, the laws of purity of blood. So, you are Christian and he is Christian. But he is Christian from an old Christian family, and you are Christian son or grandson of Jewish converts to Christianity. If you are a new Christian, Cristiano Nuevo, then according to the new racist laws in Spain, you could not obtain overwhelming majority of public functions. You could not teach at the university. Obviously, you could not belong to nobility. There were professions which were closed to you. So these people were kind of saying, well, I was Jewish, I was happy to be Jewish. Then you took me from my Jewish community, you brought me by force to the Christian community, and now you are telling me I'm not good enough Christian. Well, this rubbish has to stop. The rubbish is caused by the interference, or whatever is the English word, of religion and state. So it was the Spanish conversos that started imagining a state which is not run by religion. A state which actually collects money from the people in order to conduct public business, and the state which chases the criminals and prevents criminal acts, but doesn't really care what you believe in. So the first guys to create this were first Rabbi Salomon Ibn Verga with his book Sheret Yehuda, the scepter, whatever is the, you know, what the king has, scepter, what's the English word? What the king has in his hand. So he wrote the book Scepter of Judah, and really recommended for reading. And then Spinoza, who actually took that converso idea and brought it or developed it to the new heights. The idea of separation of state and church, and state, which is totally secular state. But then, I believe, overwhelming majority of the here present students don't know that Herzl himself is descendant of conversos. Two Catholic priests in 17th century left Catholic priests, brothers, left Spain, came to Amsterdam, and then from there to Germany, and from Germany to Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then over there they re-embraced their Judaism, becoming not converting their name, but changing their name into Lebel, and then from Lebel they became Herzl. So there is another, not only Sephardic, but also converso Jew that most of people never were aware of his origins. Yes?
So the origins of separation of church and state in every modern, I guess, country, or semi-modern country is from the Spain?
The idea started there, definitely. The idea started amongst the conversos, and it was first attested in 1492 in the book called Shevet Yehuda. And then we can see that the entire this community is obsessed with this question, because they are suffering on a daily basis because of the fact that their own society forced them into Christianity and then mistreats them within the Christianity because they were unwanted Christians or new Christians. Have you ever paid attention that Spaniards have two second names? So when you say your name and you say that you are called Nissim Goldstein or Abraham Al-Hadef, they say that they are called Gonzalez Martinez. Why two names? I beg your pardon? This is also medieval and has to do with Jews. When people were applying for different jobs, they wanted to make sure that everybody knows that they are of old Christian stock. So they would put on the petition their father's second name, their mother's second name, their paternal grandmother's second name, their maternal mother's second name, in order to prove that for a few generations back, they were good Christians and not, God forbid, Jews who converted to Christianity. So, now I want to say a few words. Oh, I didn't answer your question, your previous question. There is a beautiful book, How Judaism Became Religion, because Judaism was not really religion, and for huge numbers of Jews it still is not. It converted to religion in Europe in 18th and 19th century, when the Jews were offered participation in European societies and nations, but then they had to relinquish their own nation. They had to say that they don't belong to French nation because you couldn't belong to French. Sorry, they had to say, if you want to belong to French nation, you can't be at the same time belonging to Jewish nation. So Judaism was reduced to religion. Have you known that Napoleon actually had his own Sanhedrin? It's a huge thing. Look for that on Google or whatever. He poses the question. He poses the question to the rabbis of France, and he says, "You guys, you want emancipation, right? You want full rights. You want to be French citizens. Well, in that case, we need to know whether you guys are French, or you have some other national aspirations someplace outside France." So they told him, "Well, listen, we have a problem. This kind of, the typical rabbinic answer. Well, this kind of question we can't really answer because we don't have Sanhedrin." So he said, "Why don't you have Sanhedrin? Let's organize one." So he organized the Sanhedrin, and he posed the Sanhedrin the question whether Judaism is nation or religion. And the same thing happened in Germany, and Mendelssohn had to invent definition of Judaism as religion and so on, right? But, being the fact that Judaism was rather constitution of Middle Eastern people, it was a constitution of Middle Eastern people, not religion, right? So it has these very legal definitions who are not definitions of faith, because it was never meant to be religion in Western terms. Okay? So, now I want you to follow with me interesting developments over here. Creation of virtual Sepharad, we already spoke about that. Now, there are three cornerstones of this new identity that we call virtual Sepharad. And they are the sea, and that's what I've already established. We are the sea. They have contacts with each other. We are sea, via maris, that the community in let's say Tangier is related to community in Livorno, which is related to community in Salonika, which is related to community in Sarajevo, which is related to community. Now Sarajevo, let's go back to the map. Sarajevo, you will say, well, Sarajevo is here, right? So how Sarajevo is not on the sea? Yes, but Sarajevo has two legs on the sea. You see, Sarajevo has two daughter communities on the sea. One is called Split, and the other is called Dubrovnik. So basically, just to concentrate on one single community to show you how it functions. The Jewish community of Sarajevo was established by Jews who came from Spain to Salonika. So, in 16th century, they were actually, how do you call it? Journeying merchants, right? The merchants who don't live, how do you call it? No, not conglomeration. It's, they go to Salonika, they buy the winter stuff, they bring it to Sarajevo, they sell it.
Oh, traveling merchants.
Okay, traveling merchants. That's probably that's certainly the word. So they were coming to Sarajevo. They were going back and forth from Salonika to Sarajevo, right? So they would come to Salonika. They would spend Pesach in Salonika, and then immediately after Pesach, they would buy merchandise. I mean, how would you call it? Spring, summer production, and they would bring it to Sarajevo, selling it over there. And then before the high holidays, they would come back again to Salonika, and they would spend the high holidays there, and then they would buy new type of merchandise. But later the community was really established, and soon enough it had two legs on the sea. One is Split, and another is Dubrovnik. So basically everything is related to the sea. Now we are going to two other cornerstones of Sephardic identity. The language. Now, I was told this morning by Jay that you also learned the song Adio Querida, right? Mm-hmm. So in which language is it?
Ladino.
Ladino, right. What's Ladino, when it came to exist, and who speaks it, and who spoke it, and how many people speak it today, and so on. Did the Jews in Spain speak Judeo-Spanish?
Yes.
Of course not. The same way the Jews in America don't speak Junglish or Jewish English, but rather they speak local English. And if they are in New York, they speak just like everybody else in New York. And if they are in Alabama, they speak like everybody in Alabama. And if they are from whatever, they speak like whatever. It is true, however, the Jews in New York can make unpenetrable sentences for their Gentile neighbors when saying, darling, would you like to make the Kiddush in the Sukkah or inside? Right? And then the guy says, Kiddush, Sukkah? What he's talking about. But this doesn't constitute another language. He's speaking plain English, and he's using in plain English 100 Hebrew or Yiddish, in the case of Ashkenazim, or Hebrew and Ladino terms, which are usually related to religion. Whether it's shidduch, or it's kosher, or kasher, or it's whatever, it's always related to religion. So this is not. There is no Alabama Jewish English. There is no New York Jewish English. There is no Connecticut Jewish English. Everybody speaks proper English of his own place. The same is true of Spain. Jews of Andalusia spoke Arabic. Jews of Castilla spoke Castilian. Jews of Aragon spoke Aragonese. Jews of Catalonia spoke Catalan. Jews of Portugal spoke Portuguese. Nobody spoke Ladino. Okay? Because there was no Ladino land. Jews of Portugal spoke Portuguese, just like everybody else in Portugal. And they were having 100 or 200 Hebrew words for their liturgical peculiarities. Now, if the Jews of Portugal were to leave collectively for Corfu, and if the Jews of, let's say, of Asturias were to leave collectively for Adrianopolis, and if the Jews of, let's say, Valencia were to leave collectively for Bursa, then we would not have the problem which is so typical of the entire 16th century. But the thing is that they all got mixed. So you had a bunch of Jews from Portugal, and a bunch of Jews from southern Spain, and a bunch of Jews from Castilla, and a bunch of Jews from Aragon coming to Salonika, and coming to Izmir, and coming to Venice. So during the 16th century, you know the Jewish version of Robinson Crusoe, right? How you know, the boat sinks and there is one single survivor and he's Jewish, and then 20 years later an expedition comes to the island and he shows them how he lived on his own. And he says, this is my kitchen and this is my summer kitchen and these are my 2 synagogues. So they say, there are other survivors also. And he says, no. So they say, why do you have 2 synagogues? And he says, well, in one I pray and to the other one I never go. So, within the Jewish world, you are not only defined by what you are, but you are also defined by what you are not. And basically, many a time, you are even more defined by what you are not than by what you are. So in any case, when all these different groups of people came to Istanbul, they established their own communities. And all over Ottoman Empire, you would have 2 synagogues. One would be called Aragon, and the other would be called Castile. Not in every city, obviously, but in many cities, the community, not only it was created by the people from a certain area of Spain, but it was also given the name of that area in Spain. We are people of Castile, and our synagogue is called the Castile Synagogue. And we proceed our Castilian traditions unlike you stupid Jews from Aragon, and vice versa. So you can find in the 16th century in rabbinic response some beautiful things, such like the rabbi from, the Hazan from one Northern Macedonia. You are going to? Not. Right, Northern Macedonia, present day Northern Macedonia, the capital is Skopje. So in Skopje, there were 2 synagogues, and one synagogue was burned to the ground. Now the Hazan of that synagogue is professional Hazan. So that's what he does for his living. But he made a note, he will never go to the other synagogue. So he writes a letter to the rabbis in Salonika. And he says, I have a problem. My own synagogue was burned to the ground, and now they are offering to acquire my services in that other synagogue, but there is a problem. While my synagogue was still around, I made a note that I will never go to that synagogue. And now, what can we do? So the rabbis write him back from Salonika, and they say, well, when you made that oath, have you had in mind that even if your own synagogue is burned, you would still not go to that other one? So he said, oh, of course not. So they say, well, in that case, your oath doesn't really hold. But we can learn from this what were the relations between these communities. People would not eat each other's shechita because Jews of Aragon don't really believe the Jews of Castile know how to slaughter. And people would not marry with each other, and people would not pray with each other, because those people start with Lecha Dodi, and those people start with Mizmor Shilem Shabbat. And they even have, God forbid, different melodies. Yes?
Well, for certain traditions, I feel like there's many ways you could do it, like praying, but things like Shlita, isn't there an objective way to do it? According to Judaism?
Yes, there is, but then there are all kind of things which are not obligatory, but people would rather die than trespass them. Okay? Exactly. So you have different minhagim, and then these people say, "Oh, you don't do it this way. Oh, we do it only that way."
So they overlap on what's
Exactly.
completely allowed, but then they have different
The
minhagim.
core, everybody does the same thing, but people want you to follow their own additions to the original. You know how the customs develop. I'll give you an example. There is a Jewish community which publishes announcement. They are looking for a Chazan. So the Chazan comes to the community, and the rabbi tells him, in this community, when you start the public prayer, first you bow down in front of the teva, and then you strengthen, and then you start praying. And he says, why? The rabbi says, because you want to get your salary. And he says, yes, but why do you do this? And the rabbi says, I can care less, that's what they do. When I came, I found them doing that, but that's not against anything in Jewish law, so why would I care? And the guy says, but I want to know why. So the rabbi says, well, go to the old rabbi. So he goes to the old rabbi and he says, why does the Chazan here has to bow down and then approach the teva while he's bowing down and then start prayer? And the rabbi says, oh, don't tell me, they moved the oil lamp. Okay, so originally there was an oil lamp which is coming till here, so there was a physical reason why you needed to bow in order to pass below the oil lamp. But even when oil lamp was removed, people proceeded with the practice, because we usually sanctify the way the things were done by our forefathers without thinking too much. So, the entire 16th century, we have two major problems. All these Jewish refugees are actually creating separated communities. They are functioning with separate parallel worlds, and they have separate halachot. And this is the third stone. These two are actually interrelated, and I will immediately connect them. Who knows when Shulchan Aruch was written, by whom and why?
Oh, I know why.
Yeah. Where did he live? First, he lived here. Then he was kicked. He went to Portugal. Then he was kicked from Portugal. Then he lived in Bulgaria, in Nikopoli. Right? Someplace here in Nikopoli, in Bulgaria. And then he moved to Tzfat, North Israel. Now, what do you know about Shulchan Aruch? Why Shulchan Aruch was written? Yes, please.
Because it had the equivalent for Ashkenazi Jews, and there was like a
Yes.
there was nothing that existed for Sephardic.
What?
There was an equivalent of the Shulchan Aruch, but for Ashkenazi Jews.
No. First, Sephardic Shulchan Aruch was created, and then the Ashkenazi commentary upon the Shulchan Aruch was called tablecloth. Shulchan Aruch means set table. So the Rabbi Moshe Serles of Krakow, he wrote the Ashkenazi emendation of Sephardic Shulchan Aruch, and he called it tablecloth. This is the table, and this is the tablecloth, right? So the Ashkenazi edition comes later. No, so that's not the answer. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Ramah wrote a commentary next to every single law. The halacha written in Shulchan Aruch for Sephardim, the Ramah wrote an additional commentary when they were
Exactly.
on.
That's true.
Ashkenazi.
But that's only after the Sephardic unification Sephardic legal unification was achieved, that the Ashkenazim also jumped on the track. Okay? Now, how this all went gradually. He writes in the introduction to his Bet Yosef, to his tremendous lifelong masterpiece. He writes, the halacha, instead of being one single law for the person born in Judaism and person who converted to it, or basically to a citizen and the newcomer, it became as if, God forbid, there were 100 different Torah. We basically can see that this was not only the obsession of Maran, of Rabbi Yosef Karo, this was the obsession of all Sephardic sages of the generation. Why? Because all the way Jews lived in Spain, they had illusion of unity. Why? Because overwhelming majority of people who lived in Barcelona never met a Jew from Granada. They imagined that he must be normal. Now, if a single Jew went from Barcelona to Malaga, he discovered that they are crazy. But that was too late. The same thing, vice versa. But now all these Jews were living, or all these communities were living side by side, and they were having their prejudices, and they were practicing different Jewish laws. Now, from you guys coming from America, this is normal, because you all have in one single city Reconstructionist community and Orthodox community and more Orthodox community and whatever, texting Shomer Shabbat, postmodern, post-community, or whatever. But in medieval times, this was not normal. Jews had idea that their national constitution should be a single one. And so everybody was living in kind of shock. Who are all these crazy Jews who do Judaism differently than us? So the first idea how to solve the problem came from Rabbi Yaakov Berah. His second name is Berah, Yaakov Berah. He wanted to re-establish the Sanhedrin, and where? In the north of Israel. We are talking about early 16th century. One of the teachers of Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, Rabbi Yaakov Berah, wants to re-establish Sanhedrin. Yes, please.
If the Ashkenaz population was bigger than the Sephardi population like it is today, then why wouldn't an Ashkenaz authority have wanted to unify?
It wasn't.
It wasn't?
It wasn't. The heart and the mind of the entire Jewish world was Spain. The heart and the mind of the entire Jewish world was Spain. Ashkenazi community could be compared with leg. I don't know whether it's left leg or right leg, but it's certainly not upper part of the body in 16th century. So, not only in numbers, but also, first of all in numbers. Medieval Spanish Jewry, 600,000 people. You know, when Rashi wrote his tremendous commentary on Talmud, what do you imagine, how many Jews lived in his city? 200,000? Less than 1,000. And then you had three main German cities with, big Jewish community, each with 2,000 people. Tiny numbers, nothing comparable to Jewish Spain. Nothing comparable. So, what happens is, Rabbi Yaakov Berah wants to re-establish Sanhedrin. Now, what do you think who was against it? Yes, please.
The Ottoman Empire?
No, they can kill us. Jews have autonomy. You want to have Sanhedrin? Have Sanhedrin. You want to have... No. These people could really afford neglecting all other Jews. They just couldn't kill us. It's just like, can you imagine that American Jews today really care about what the president of the Jewish community of Albania wrote them? First half an hour they are discussing where the heck is Albania, and then they switch to something else. So no, Sephardic Jews were too haughty to care what other Jews wanted or did. Yes, other, please.
Christians?
No, Christians were irrelevant for the overwhelming majority of the world to reach Sephardic ecstasy scale, which is Muslim world. Yes?
The Sephardi Jews themselves.
Right, but now who? Children, women,
men. They all probably thought that their traditions were different, and they didn't want to keep themselves so different.
Just like usually nobody asked children, nobody asked, exactly. Nobody asked children, nobody asked women, nobody even asked men. The rabbis had a problem. Why? Because if the Sanhedrin was ever re-established, that would mean 70 top rabbis, and everybody else is their clerk. Now, most of the rabbis just didn't like the idea. Just didn't like the idea. They preferred to be the head of the mouse than to be the tail of the lion. Or is that English saying?
Yeah.
Better it be. So, in any case, rabbis were against the Sanhedrin. Now, when rabbis are against the Sanhedrin, they don't say we are against the Sanhedrin. That sounds stupid. They say, no, we can't do it. We need Messiah. We need whatever. But, right? Actually, the thing is, there were probably 1,500 rabbis that were afraid that they wouldn't make it to 70. So, that's how the problem was. That's how they put a leg to Rabbi Yaakov Berav's solution to the problem. He then said, let me at least re-establish the semicha. So he re-establishes the semicha and he gives the semicha to his pupils. One of them is obviously Rabbi Yosef Karo himself. Doesn't help. The rabbis are not impressed. They say, oh, who are you to give somebody semicha? The rabbi from whom I learned is much bigger than you. And I'm much bigger than pupils to whom you gave semicha. So I don't care. So, next step is Rabbi Yosef Karo says, why didn't the Jews... No, he says like this. We can't, follow this, we can't impose the customs of Aragon on Castile. Doesn't work. We can't impose the customs of Castile on Aragon. Doesn't work. Let's go to Judaism before these stupid customs. Let's go to Mishneh Torah. Maimonides is born in Spain 1135, and now we are coming to another aspect of this. Not only there is a huge tension between the newcomers, between different Sephardic refugee communities, but there are in all these parts there were original Jews who lived there. The Romaniotti in the Eastern Roman Empire and the Oriental Jews in Islamic lands. And now, oh, I need to show you this. Then I'll get back to, if I find it. I hope I will. Oh, it's too much. Yeah, this is all transatlantic, but we will never get to it because I'm... Yeah. Look at this. Here is Fez, the city in middle Morocco, in central Morocco. And then in Fez, you have Slat al-Fasiyin. You see?
We'll be there. We're going there.
Yeah.
We will go to this.
Oh, great. Now, what does that mean? There are 50, 60 synagogues in Fez. And then one synagogue is called the Synagogue of Fez. Aren't all synagogues of Fez? Yes?
Maybe like that one was built first. I feel like that one had more of the authority, like the more of the higher authority than the rabbis.
No. This was the... Yes, please.
Was it like how you're saying that the rabbis want to kind of get rid of all these different like sects and communities and traditions and kind of create like one unified Jewish tradition?
No. Yes?
Wouldn't they all be synagogues of Fez, but only some people would go to some synagogues and others would go to others?
War. You are getting there? You are getting there? Yes, please.
This is that the original Jews that
Exactly. This is the synagogue of the people of Fez who lived in Fez before the Sephardic ever came. And then the Sephardim started establishing their own communities called Ibn Danan and so on. And then they called this synagogue the local synagogue, the synagogue of the law. Imagine, he lives in Fez and he says, oh, that's the synagogue of the people of Fez. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Spain. So, look at this synagogue. Established in 1492 in Marrakesh, the most southern point to which the expulsees came, and it's called Al-Azma, Gerouche. The synagogue which is called Expulsion. The synagogue called Expulsion. Expulsion from Spain. So this synagogue was established by Spanish expulsees. But then there is a problem. Spanish expulsees and local Moroccan Jews, or Spanish expulsees and local Romaniotti Jews. And then separation between the Spanish expulsees. So you have tremendous fights over, can you imagine, every single synagogue, every single Shabbat, everybody's quarreling where to start, where to finish, when to stand, when to sit, when to drink, when to sing, when to be silent. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef Karo says the following. If I pick Maimonides, this will solve all my problems. Why? Because Maimonides was born in Spain, so he's recognized by Spanish Jews as one of the pillars of Judaism. But he also moved to the Orient and lived in Egypt. And he's recognized by Egyptian Jews and by Oriental Jews as Marad Atra, as the master of the land, or as the master of the wheel. So the only thing I need to do now is basically to convince the rabbis. So Rabbi Yosef Karo says, what did the rabbis say? Why didn't they accept Mishneh Torah? Oh, they said that they didn't accept Mishneh Torah because it didn't have footnotes. Rambam never said where he took certain things from in Talmud. And really, many objections to Rambam were just about that. How do we know? Why should we follow you? We need to know where does this comes from. And Rambam just states the law, and he doesn't say, go to Menachot 75b and compare also to Ketuvim 23a, and maybe you should if you are already there, and so on. So he says, look at this. He says, I'll write a book which will be footnotes to Maimonides. And he writes a book and calls it Kesef Mishneh. Kesef Mishneh, which means the secondary amount of money. Now I want you to think and to enter this culture and to tell me where this name comes from. Kesef Mishneh. Rabbi Yosef Karo's commentary to Maimonides' Mishneh Torah. Yes, please.
Could be super wrong with left on Mishnah? Like,
No, but these from the Bible. Yes.
I thought it would be more about like the merchant and how the trade and stuff like that.
No, it's not. I'll give you a clue. Do you remember, what's the name of Rabbi Karo? Yosef. Oh, okay, cool. Do you remember any biblical? Okay, so now try to think. Joseph, biblical Joseph, and Kesef Mishneh. Kesef Mishneh, secondary money. Doesn't ring the bell? Yeah.
Nathaniel.
Yes.
Joseph in the Bible, when he was the second in command, was in charge of all of the accounts.
Yes, but that's not secondary money. That's not secondary money. You remember when Jacob sends Joseph to the land of Egypt. He gives him money to buy him, what's the English word? Food. So, when they go back, they discover that Joseph returned them money and put to every guy's bag, put his money back. Then when they come to Jacob, and a few years later, Jacob sends them back to Egypt. He tells them, take the first money to bring back to Joseph because that might have been a mistake. And then take secondary money for the second row of food. So why is this important? Because he is called Yosef. He is writing a commentary which is second try of Mishneh Torah. I like it. Not everybody needs to like it, but I do. I really love it. So he calls it Kesef Mishneh because this is the secondary money that Jacob, his teacher, Yaakov Merav, is sending to Jewish people in order to spiritually bribe them to accept Maimonides in the second trial. What was the reaction of rabbinical establishment? Now, guys, you finally have it. Here's the Mishneh Torah. It brings you all the settled law. You always objected that it doesn't have footnotes. Well, now Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote the footnotes, so it's all done. Well, what happened? Did we accept Mishneh Torah after the intervention? Of course not. The rabbis said, "Oh, you shouldn't have bothered." Now,
That laugh was unreal.
Psyche, I like it. So, you never know what's there, behind nice words. So, in any case, the rabbis didn't really accept the commentary because the problem with Mishneh Torah was just the same as the problem with Sanhedrin. Mishneh Torah makes overwhelming majority of rabbis superficious. Nobody needs you. Because if everything is complicated, you know what? Rabbis are just like Linux or DOS people who hate Windows because everybody can use Windows. You follow that? You know how all these technicians and so on, they just can't stay at Windows. Why? Because once upon a time, they were magicians. You would have to come to them and they would tell you C, double stop, dir, slash, whatever, and then some, the miracle happens. Now, you just go to files and you see all of that in icons. And they say, I hate that. Now, why do they hate that? Because they've learned for so many years how to make this C, double stop, dir, and whatever, and now everybody can just see, icons. And the same thing was with the rabbis. They just hated Mishneh Torah because it was too user-friendly and it was too Windows. So, then they said to Rabbi Yosef Karo, what's the problem? The problem is that you didn't include the problem into the problem. Jewish sentence. The problem is that you didn't include the problem in the solution of the problem. We want our costumes back. Maimonides doesn't bring any costumes, that's a problem. We want our costumes back. Then Rabbi Yosef Karo, everybody else would get sick of Jews, but not Rabbi Yosef Karo. So what he does, he says, oh, I've got the clue. They don't want any living authority like Sanhedrin, and they don't want a single uncomplicated Windows-like book. So what I will do, he established for them the tribunal of 3 dead rabbis. So he takes a book produced by an Ashkenazi migrant to Spain. Okay? Ben Harosh, the son of famous German rabbi who came to Spain, Rosh. So his son wrote a book called Arba'at Turim. And this is actually compilation of European Ashkenazi tradition and European Sephardic tradition, and in other words, Sephardic of Christian Spain. So Sephardim had the idea of codification. So this guy comes with all Ashkenazi minhagim, he accepts the Sephardic idea of codification, and he codifies the law, which now represents Christian Spain and basically Ashkenazi Judaism. So Rabbi Yosef Karo says, I'll take this book, which most of the expulsees from Spain go by, because it's the book for Christian Spain. And every single halacha in that book, I will run by the authority of 3 rabbis. By Rif, which represents the North African tradition, and Southern Spanish tradition, Muslim Spain tradition. by Rambam, which represents Muslim Spain and the East, and by Rosh, which represents Christian Spain and Europe. So whatever Jewish law says in Arba'at Turim, he writes a book called, now I want you to use your brains again. The book is called Bet Yosef. The commentary of Rabbi Yosef Karo to a book from Christian Spain called Arba'at Turim, the four pillars or the four, is called Bet Yosef. Why? You remember the first book, Kesef Mishneh? Well, the Kesef Mishneh and Bet Yosef are mentioned in the same parasha. They were brought to Bet Yosef. They were brought to the household of Joseph. Now, who is Joseph? He is Joseph, the writer of the book. So basically now, by this book, everybody will be brought to me. In first book, he was very modest towards Maimonides. In second book, he's basically saying, now I've learned the game. Now I'm going to win. Now I know how you want me to play the game. I'll play the game by your rules. I'll go the book from Christian Spain with all the customs. I'll run it by 3 rabbis which represent communities which need to merge. North Africa, Orient, and Christian Spain. And I will go by majority. And you will have to agree, because otherwise, yeah. And then he says, and I'll call this book My House. My house. I'm bringing you guys to my house. It's a my, right? Everybody's coming for a drink to my house, right? So, this time, everybody loved it. Why? It was enough too complicated to need rabbis, but it was unifying everybody. The Christian Spain with its customs, the Morocco and Oriental Jews. So everybody was. Now this is where Rabbi Moshe Seles comes to the picture. And he says, sitting in Krakow, in Poland, it's vision. The guy says, oh, this is historical chance. Sephardim are reunifying themselves. They are unifying themselves with Oriental Jews and with North African Jews. And only the Ashkenazim are left out. Let's join. There is a problem. Rabbi Yosef Karo goes by the majority of the 3. So, Rif and Rambam are always majority against Rosh. Why? Because these are very similar traditions. Now, the guys in Poland feel kind of cheated out. Why? Because they say, well, this game was solved to start with, because it was always 2 against 1. So the tradition of Christian Spain and the tradition of Ashkenazi Jewry brought to Christian Spain, they are always undermined by majority of Rif and Rambam. So he said, I'll write a commentary. And every place where he rules against our local tradition, I will say, yes, but here we do it differently. Yes, but here we do it differently. Yes, but here we do it differently. So, this is the way that all the Jews united around one single book. This book still represents the beautiful dichotomic schizophreny of Jewish nation, because you have the law, and then it says, but it's not the law. And you have the law, and then it says, but here we don't do the law. And so on. But at least everybody is following the same book. Right? And everybody is on the same page. And Ashkenaz Sephardim and Oriental Jews and North African Jews are reading the big letters, and Ashkenazim are first reading the big letters and then reading small contract letters to see whether they do what's there or they do something else. But everybody follows the same book. So this all happened in 16th century. Now, how much time I have, because I'm totally watchless?
I think we're down to like the last 4 minutes or so, let's say 4 or 5 minutes.
4 or 5 minutes, okay. So now I want to give you, first of all, you should just know that with all how unorganized I am, we did do the homework, because linguistic unification is also part of this endeavor. throughout 16th century, they are quarreling over the law. And they are making different attempts. Sanhedrin, Mishneh Torah, Bet Yosef. Then when he wrote his book Bet Yosef, the rabbis of the world told him, we like this. Could you make now only the digest version? So the digest version of Bet Yosef is called Shulchan Aruch. That's what Shulchan Aruch is all about. Shulchan Aruch is the digest version of Bet Yosef. Now, the new yeshivot in Sephardic world were established mostly by the people from Castile. And you remember in one of the American elections there was this motto, is the economy stupid? Well, it's exactly what happened here. People who had money could open yeshivot. So the Jews from Castile made money in the Ottoman Empire. They opened the yeshivot. Then those yeshivot were kind of becoming something that everybody looks up to and wants to follow. So the same way, if a Jew from Alabama joins Jews on a cruise, soon enough he will start speaking fabulous and whatever, and not them will start speaking Alabama, right? He would like to fit in, and he will imagine that the elite is in New York, and then he will try to fit in, and that's exactly what happened. The Jews from all other realms, by the end of 16th century, were trying to fit in within the economic and intellectual world created by the expulsees of Castile. And this is how Castilian became the base of future Ladino, but Ladino doesn't contain only Castilian. So the lexic and the grammar are basically Castilian, but there is plenty of lexic borrowings from other Iberian languages, as well from surrounding Ottoman languages and cultures, whether Turkish or Persian and Arabic who came through Turkish, or Bulgarian, Serbian, Italian, French, German, and so on. So, this is Ladino. Now I want to tell you another story, and with that I'm done, but that's something that I really feel somebody who is introduced to Sephardic studies needs to know. Everybody speaks about Lurianic Kabbalah, but nobody underlines the context. The context is totally expulsion, 16th century. You have to imagine that this is the mind and the heart of the entire Jewish nation. So during the entire 16th century, all Jewish minds, all over the world, were bothered by a single question. Where was God during the Spanish Holocaust?
Where was God during the other one?
During the Spanish Holocaust. Well, that's exactly how Jewish theology today is stuck with the question, where is God in Auschwitz? And ever since Second World War, we are running it in the background even when we are not speaking about it. You want an example? When do we commemorate Holocaust in this country? We don't commemorate it on 27th of January with the rest of the world, because then we would be object of history. Germans come, they put you into a concentration camp, they gas you, they don't gas everybody, then the Russians come and liberate you. So what you are an object. Is this to me? Yeah. So, we don't do it on 27th. We don't do it on 27th. When do we do it?
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. We are in Israel, it's not Switzerland. In any case, when do we do it? Yom HaShoah, when? Exactly. So in this country, we don't call it the day of the Holocaust, we call it the day of the Holocaust and heroism. Yom HaShoah ve'Gvura. And we commemorated, concentrate here. We commemorated after Purim and Pesach, right? Then you have Yom HaShoah. Then after Yom HaShoah you have Yom HaZikaron for the Israeli soldiers. And then you have the Day of Independence. So basically, even though we don't dare to speak about Holocaust, yes, the way we commemorate it shows you that what we are teaching ourselves And what we are teaching next generations is that Holocaust was part of redemption. That Holocaust was part of establishment of Israel. That's why we don't do it. There were other uprisings. We didn't need to concentrate on Ghetto Warsaw uprising. There was a day when Jewish Brigade was created in the island of Rab, in the Adriatic Sea. But no, that's not what we wanted. We don't want it on Tisha B'Av, because that's rupture without reason. We don't want it during the winter holidays, autumn holidays. We want it in the holidays of renewal and resurrection. And that's where we put it. So you see, we are discussing it, but we are not discussing it with mouth. We are discussing it the old Jewish way, na'aseh v'nishma. So first you do, you commemorate Yom HaShoah on that day, and then nishma, and then you understand why you are doing it. So it's action-based or action-oriented. Just to finish, the same way the Sephardic Jews in 16th century and everybody else was bothered with the same question. The same way the Jews from Yemen today are bothered by Holocaust, even though they were not really subjected personally to persecution of that level, but they are bothered because that's Holocaust, right? So the same way the Ashkenazi Jews and the Oriental Jews and the Moroccan Jews in 16th century were bothered by the medieval Auschwitz. You have to understand that expulsion from Spain was medieval Auschwitz. Now, what are the possible answers? To the question, where was God during the... Okay, so one answer is there is no God. Other answer is there is God, but he doesn't care. The other answer is there is God, he cares, but it's just that he doesn't care about us. He cares about Christians, he cares about Muslims, he cares about whatever. Most of the Jews wanted an answer which would leave their self-understanding untouched. Now, what's their self-understanding? Yes, there is God, yes, he does care, and he cares especially about us. And still though, we are hacked up. So how do you put all of that together? Please.
But there's a master plan that we don't understand, and then it's part of the larger plan, and we'll see why soon.
Exactly. So it took them 100 years to develop what we call today Lurianic Kabbalah, which came with the following solution. Now look at this, and this is the last sentence. They say like this: God is good, and he wanted to bestow goodness. And the goodness was so extremely good and powerful that the instruments through which it was coming into the world exploded. Not because God is bad, and not because he was trying to do bad things, and not because he was neglectful for a moment. He was sending good, but the good was so good, so extremely good, that the instruments broke up, the vessels broke up, and we got affected because we are so close to him. Okay, so that was the solution of 16th century, and if there are no additional questions, we can stop.
That's a beautiful continuation and an introduction to what's going to be perplexing us, truly perplexing us for the next few months as we explore not just Morocco, but Spain, Portugal. We're going to be following in the tracks of your lectures, and we'll keep you updated, I promise you.
Oh, beautiful. Looking forward.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
January 6th, Monday Night Learning 7:15. Please sign up for Ali's class.